Welcome to Futureproof Business. Smart strategies, real insights, and tools to lead and scale in a fast-changing world. Let's future-proof your success.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Rosenstein. Today I have the honor of interviewing Brian Walsh. Brian, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really excited. I know we discussed a while back, but I was waiting with bated breath.
Wonderful. Can you share a little bit about your background and what it you do now with the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my name is Brian Walsh. I've worked about 25 years in software development, primarily on my own in the beginning. And then after going to school and then graduating, and 2 weeks later, the iPhone came out. Everything I learned was turned upside down. And so I've navigated everything from driving a truck to working in marketing, working for Subaru of America, the corporate headquarters, doing some of their amazing connected vehicle technology, the communication between your car and your smart devices. And then today I'm an IT director for an insurance company that leads several different teams and interact with 30, 40 different people on any given time throughout my day and my work week. And then in my off hours, I spend a lot of time working on building up, mental habits and preaching good Stoic principles. And I wrote a book called Habitcraft 101 that kind of talks and navigates the ways to create good habits.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Can you share what inspired you to write that book, Habitcraft 101?
Yeah, so I decided to write the book because I've spent so many years navigating life's chaos on a day-to-day basis. And then about 7 years ago, I had a wake-up call. A few months prior, I had done a triathlon, just a short little, like one of the shorter versions. And a few months later, I received my blood work results and my doctor said, "You're on the road to diabetes." And so that shook my entire world because I said, I just completed a triathlon. I'm totally healthy. And he's like, "No, you're fit, you're active, you're not healthy." And so I shifted everything because I had a 1-year-old at home and I couldn't look at him without thinking like, oh, I'm making my life harder. And that's going to make it even more difficult for me to be present and, be there for him. And now I actually have two older sons, and becoming a dad and having that wake up call, I changed my entire perspective, my identity, the way that I approach fitness, the way I approach health, the way I approach life. And one of the things that I learned is that my oldest has ADHD and my other siblings had it too, but I never was formally diagnosed. Well, it turns out that the writing was on the wall. I was just looking out the window, looking at the squirrel, right? So I decided to write this book to kind of help convince myself that I could focus and create something that was useful not only to myself, but to others. It was really just a passion project of I needed to navigate all the things that I've changed over the last 7 years and kind of embody that mindset, that shift, and understanding myself as well as the actions that align with that identity, and build out the system, very straightforward and very practical system that works for almost anyone. So that's, that long story short, I really just wanted to kind of prove to myself that I could do it.
Great. So what type of habits did you first craft when you were getting started?
Yeah. So in the very beginning, one of the things that I learned is that we will fight tooth and nail to avoid loss. And so what I did was I once attended this seminar where this individual was talking about productivity. And he said that if you ever want to make a change, you got to put your money where your mouth is. And so the habit that I changed is, one, I found a a gym that did personal training and nutrition. So I scheduled all of my training sessions at 5 a.m. in the morning because I didn't want to disrupt I noticed that I didn't want to go to the gym, or I didn't want to do really anything after work. So I'm like, let me remove that hurdle. Let me do it before everything. And I would stay up till 11, 12 o'clock to binge Netflix and, with my wife and just enjoy. Not to mention I was sleepless because my youngest son made it a little difficult at the time, right? And so my habit that I worked on was becoming a morning person. And I found that by scheduling the training session, I spent $1,000, which we didn't have, by the way. I put it on a credit card, and I spent $1,000, and failure wasn't an option because I didn't want my wife to look at me and say, well, you spent $1,000. What are you going to do with it? What do you have to show for it? And so I challenged myself and made failure so painful to become this morning person. And so I started crafting this morning routine. And at first it was just once a week, be there at 5 a.m. and work out for 30 minutes with the personal trainer. And then that cascaded after 2 or 3 weeks of progress. I said, oh, well, if I could do it 1 week, let me try 2 weeks. Or if I could do it 1 day, let me try 2 days. And then that cascaded to 3 days, then 4 days, then 5 days. And then all of a sudden, after 6 months, I became this individual who had a morning routine that woke up, my clothes are right there, ready to go, grab my pre-workout, grab my keys, go in the car and go work out every single morning. So now I wake up at 4:15 for the past 6 years. I wake up at 4:15 every morning and I move. And I'm not talking about, not every day is 100%. Some days 40% is my 100%. And sometimes I just stretch, or I'll even just sit there and think. I won't use my phone or anything like that, because I find that distracts me and that's negative towards my morning routine. But I just sit with it, and most of the time I'm successful. But on those mornings that I don't feel it, I am fortunate enough that I got a glorified coat rack, aka a treadmill, from someone, a family friend. And sometimes I'll just get on the treadmill. I'll be on my phone, or I mounted a TV and I'll watch a show and walk for 40 minutes. And that sets my day up for everything. And that changed everything. That changed who I was and who I wanted to be each day.
So you talk about like the bad day excellence. What does that phrase mean to you?
Yeah. So one of the biggest lessons that I learned is that external motivation in particular will only get you to your first bad day. We often will go and, like, the beginning of the year, we'll say, all right, I'm going to lose 100 pounds, or I'm going to go to the gym every single day. And it's because we feel this refresher at the beginning of the year, right? This mentality that kind of like lights us up, and we have all of this motivation because we see others do it. Or we've been programmed on social media. We see all these people who have wonderful lives, and this external motivation all of a sudden pushes you to action. And so that external motivation isn't rooted in your personality. It isn't part of your identity until you align your actions with who you are. You really have to look inwards. And so what bad day excellence is it's about 4 parts planning and 1 part action. Because I will come up with, okay, I'm going to build a new habit, or I have a new goal. And what is that? It's kind of like James Clear's 1% rule. What is that tiny action that you could do that day that still walks you towards it? And on the lowest of lows, those days where nothing is firing, you have no motivation, what are you doing? And so that's what that is. Bad day excellence is that plan of like, okay, I want to go to the gym 5 days a week. And on the worst of the worst days, you know what? I'm just going to put my shoes on. And the reason why this works is because when you act, you create motion, and motion creates motivation. It's never the inverse. Yes, you may have external motivation, but really in the end, It's the action that builds that momentum that you needed.
So how does like your ADHD like shape your relationship with like your habits and who you are?
It's funny, when I read Atomic Habits, first of all, reading is very difficult for myself because I need to stay active. Even now I have, my foot is bouncing, right? You can even see my hands. I am in motion all of the time. So reading is actually very difficult. And so what I've done is I have taken what I've learned from James Clear's Atomic Habits, from my own experiences, which, you know, I find that the only failure is inaction. I am constantly in motion and constantly failing forward throughout this whole entire process. And so when it comes to building habits, there are certain things that I've adjusted. Like James Clear talks about the 2-minute rule. And the 2-minute rule is like, you want to kickstart a habit, do something so small that only takes you 2 minutes. Well, with ADHD, we need something more. We need novelty. We need to reframe what we're doing to almost be gamified, right? Instead of just saying, okay, I'm just going to do it for 2 minutes. No, we need to either come up with a reward for doing it, right? We need that little carrot on the stick, or we need to say, okay, well, I bet you I can do this within 1 minute, right? Like, I think I can clean this entire room within, 30 minutes. Ready, set, go, right? Like all of a sudden I challenge myself, I gamify it. And so that's where the ADHD actually kind of makes things interesting, right? Because you're going to find yourself throughout the whole entire process of building habits, or even just day to day, and you'll shiny ball syndrome. If it doesn't have that novelty or that glitter or even a random noise, you're not going to gravitate to it. So you have to kind of be very cognizant of what you're doing and how are you going to reframe what you're doing from boring to awesome.
So can you maybe explain, like you mentioned, like Atomic Habit, how does your book, like Habit Craft 101, different than, other books on the market like Atomic Habits?
Yeah, no, I love that question because I was just contemplating that the other day. The biggest thing, I'm not even saying that my book is better than someone else's book. I think one of the best things about my book is it is a companion workbook to your life. The reason why I called it Habitcraft 101 is because we often will read these like 300-page books, right? And in Atomic Habits, I love it. I've also read, the Habits of Highly Effective People, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Psychology of Money. That's all about habits around finances. Tiny Habits is a book that I've read. I've read everything under the sun, but one of the things that I've found is that someone like myself needs action, needs novelty throughout the whole entire book. The meat and potatoes of the book, right? All of the actual written things have actionable items, like whether it's learning who you are from a DISC personality assessment, right? DISC is, dominant, influential, steady, and conscientious. It's a very simple classification system that I walk you through it. And then I also give you 25 different ways to implement a habit. And I say, hey, this habit fits these 2 personality designs. Or I also give examples of real world individuals, right? Like whether it's Oprah or Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, like all these individuals, I go and analyze who they were and how they approached, how their personality type helps build their habits, and giving you real world examples while giving you activities to follow throughout it. Because again, action creates motivation and momentum that we need to improve. We need every single tiny win in order to really see, because a lot of times we'll look at the goal, right? I don't want you to look at the goal because the goal is end. it's the end. But something like self-improvement um, or even just progress, what we need to do is look at how far we've gone. And so the best part about the book is the fact that the whole entire thing, like half the book of the pages is actually a logbook to follow, just reflect each day on here's your morning log, here's your evening log, and let's create that momentum, and that way we can look back. And all of a sudden we've built this, because I found that it takes a lot longer than 30 days to build a habit. You'll hear a lot of people, oh, you only need 27 days or 30 days or something like. No. In fact, I find me personally, it took, like I said, 6 months just to build up to become a morning person. And that wasn't my goal. My goal wasn't to become a morning person. My goal was to be present and energetic. In fact, on my mirror where I work out, my number one goal is pain-free days. I'm no longer trying to, I've lost 100 pounds. If you looked at the picture when I started, it looked like that Brian ate this Brian, right? And so that is amazing. And some days I eat way too much, but I don't beat myself up, because it's not part of who I am. And who I am is actually just someone who just always is constantly evolving. And my number one goal with my morning workouts is a pain-free day. So yeah, that's the difference. The book itself, it's all about just finding out who you are, how you think. And then, like a software developer will build out an application, you're going to build this outward spiral, right? Like it's almost like a tornado in the end. You've created all of this energy right from that single spark. And in my book, I have this thing called the spark spiral that just talks about how you iterate and keep going outwards and outwards and outwards, because what you've built is something that you can be really proud of.
So you mentioned something called habit loops. Can you explain how they work and why they're so critical?
Yeah. So in Habitcraft 101, I break it down because I need novelty. So I break it into the TAP method, okay, or that TAP behavior cycle. And what that is you have your trigger, and that's something that kicks off. And, whether it's an environment trigger or a time trigger or an emotional trigger, could be anything. But you have your trigger, and then you have your action. Your action is your response to that trigger. And almost 99% of the time, it's a reaction. We have two systems of thinking, and the one system that normally fits within that TAP system is that reactive brain. And a lot of times it's filled with bias and it can be very erroneous. It's kind of how we often think about hey, when we're growing, we're we're painful. And why do we fall off? Because our brains are wired for being safe. And so that action is where I spend most of my time. I try to figure out, okay, well, what was the trigger and what did I act? And then the last part of the TAP behavior cycle is the prize, right? What did I gain from this? This happened, I did this, and I'll ask 5 whys. I'll ask myself, why, like my 4-year-old. And I'll continue to ask until I find the root cause of what did I gain from this? What was that prize? And a lot of times it's to avoid pain. And so what's really important is if you can identify what that trigger is and what that prize is, you can change the behavior to kind of craft a better version of that prize, right? So for instance, when I feel down, I'll eat ice cream, right? That was one of my coping mechanisms before I kind of changed everything. And I asked myself, okay, well, what was the trigger? It was an emotional trigger. And so I was like, okay, well, when I'm sad, I don't want to be sad anymore. Well, ice cream is happiness. Yeah, of course it's happiness, right? But what are some other things that you could feel happy on? And so like I started changing my behavior, the reaction, the action inside of that loop, and found that, okay, well, I'm trying to avoid feeling sad. What is something that I could do that would avoid feeling sad, or what could fill me up? My family, well, my oldest son and I have created this rule. When we are down, we lift others up. And why this works so well is because my identity is a helpful person. I am here to find joy in every moment and, like being inspired with every interaction that I do. And so now when I feel blue, I go and I help somebody. And it could be as simple as just giving somebody a call up and say, hey, how are you doing? I ask about them. And then, I'm not trying to fix them or anything, but I felt like reaching out to individuals would really help. Or I'll volunteer. I volunteer for a nonprofit called HopeWorks, and I mentor individuals that are, young professionals from 16 to 25. And I help them, navigate, getting into like an IT career and kind of help them work there. And that reward ended up being like, oh, I'm not sad anymore, to now like, oh, not only am I not sad, but someone else isn't sad. The reward, that prize was so much bigger than I could ever imagine.
So you mentioned like in the beginning of the conversation that like you've been doing IT software development for many years, but you do more than just that. You're in a leadership position now, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So that you focus a lot on our leadership. So how do you incorporate all these things that we're talking about with like having great habits and stuff like that into your leadership?
That is a wonderful question. I think the biggest incorporation is the fact that my identity as a leader is a servant leader. And I have this Post-it right here on my monitor, and it's all about listening. And so one of the leadership habits that I have actively worked on every day, every interaction, every meeting, and mind you, I'm completely remote. So I never see all of my coworkers face to face. Sometimes we'll meet in quarterly planning, but not everyone. There are a number that I haven't. So one of the things that I've incorporated into my leadership when it comes to habits is active listening. So I utilize the PAR method. The PAR method is pause, acknowledge, and respond. And this is one of the most powerful things that you could do. Just ask more questions. Let them lead where we're going. One of the things that I've learned in leadership from some of the most amazing people that I've ever worked with was that giving individuals accountability and giving them the freedom to make the choices. I will tell a lot of my coworkers, I'll tell them, you have 52% ownership. How would you approach it? And I tell them, yeah, you have 52%, but that other 48%, that's mine. That's all the bad stuff. If it goes wrong, I got you. I'll take the hit. I'll take the bullet, right? I believe in you. So by becoming a servant leader, as well as implementing active listening using the PAR method, I've built in that ecosystem of like building trust throughout the whole entire process. And we have this statement, this kind of like inner team, because I lead like 3 or 4 teams. Inside of there is this ecosystem in this company that I work with today, which is amazing. It's Crum & Forster Insurance. The company as a whole is wonderful. And then when you look at our teams, we follow this guiding light statement, which again is on a Post-it on my monitor. I'm a valued member of a winning team doing meaningful work in an environment of trust. And so even today, I had 2 one-on-ones and I asked, how are we doing with this? Are there any aspects of this that we could improve on? And I let them lead, because again, if you give them that connection, most of my one-on-ones, I don't even care about work. I want to know how we ally with them and build a career that they're proud of. because I find that we spend most of our time at work, right? That 8 hours talking with people, problem solving. Sometimes it's more than work, like being with our family. And so I try to create an environment where they can work on both their career as well as themselves. And when I create that environment, they flourish. And that's one of the most amazing lessons that I've learned by building that just listen first habit.
And but you not only lead, teams at your own company, you also coach other leaders as well, correct?
Yes. Yeah. We created a leadership circle, both at work, and I have a group of individuals that we meet once a month, every second Tuesday, where we talk about what we're doing and some of the trials and tribulations that we've had since that entire time. And one of the amazing parts of that is that, again, we're constantly iterating and constantly learning. And I try not to prescribe what they need to do. I let them find what works best for them.
So how does it that you coach other leaders? Like what is it you do for them?
Yeah. So a lot of times what we do is we kind of work on the executive presence, right? Like you've got one of the biggest things of executive presence is, poise, right? Or even communication. Like for instance, the last session that we've worked on was communication, where we used one of the exercises from Toastmaster, which is the table topic. And it's a 2-minute, I will give them a topic, and they need to use 2 minutes to define and clearly communicate what they feel like communicating around that topic. And it could be completely random. I even asked one individual who I knew had 2 children. I said, if you're stuck on a desert island, what kid would you bring? So because you never know what could come up, or whether it's, your company's going south and you have to, you were just given a piece of paper, right? And you have to communicate it, right? How do you quickly assess and communicate that out with not just coldness, but understanding? And so we'll work on the communication. We'll do exercises where we push into uncomfortable spaces, right? There will be times where I'll work one-on-one with an individual and I will interrupt them continuously without them understanding why. And I want to push them into that uncomfortable space and see how they navigate out of it. And that's what's really important. Is it's almost like there's this thing called exposure therapy. You find these things that you struggle with, and then we work and lean into those situations and then create that tap behavior cycle, because the more that you train yourself to be in those situations, the more you'll grow and the more you'll be ready on those bad days. So that's a lot of times what we work on. And it's very self-driven, because yes, what works for me works for me. I can give real life experience of how I've dealt with situations. The likelihood of you and I living the same exact life, having the same exact experiences, is like taking a 32-sided die, giving it to everyone in Philadelphia, roll it, and get the same number. It's not going to happen. So that's why we kind of navigate a lot of this and coach to a point where they feel comfortable with themselves.
So,
pardon me.
What do you think, like in your opinion, what does it take for somebody to become like a good leader?
It's kind of like answering the question, what is success? It's relative. I believe that if we were to look back at the Stoics, right? The Stoics are people from like ancient Greek, Marcus Aurelius, right? One of the most amazing people of world history. amazing leader. And yet he was still, he studied Stoicism. He wrote the series of books, which you could find at your local library or called Meditations. In fact, other than the Bible, Meditations is the #1 book that was ever sold and will ever be sold. It's amazing. And, in Stoicism, it talks about controlling what you can and letting go of what you can't. And so I find one of the aspects of it is being a good leader is understanding that it is not your job to solve other people's problems for them, but being able to be calm when they are not and helping them navigate their calmness, helping them navigate, okay, we have a problem and we need to figure out how do we walk towards the solution. And it's not feeding them the fish, it's giving them the rod, right? Like if you give them the tools, they can, when it comes to being a successful leader, it's not necessarily about being inside of the day-to-day operations. It's creating, franchising yourself in individuals and putting them into the opportunities to grow and beyond what they even thought. I will tell every single individual that I am not going to tell you what to do. I can give you examples of how I would approach it, but first, let's do what is called a 1-3-1. A 1-3-1 is identify the one specific problem and then come up with 3 viable options. And then what do you think is the most recommended option? By doing that, it helps them grow and push them into those uncomfortable spaces. But all of a sudden, they have the confidence and competence because they walk through all the different scenarios. So I think really a successful leader isn't someone who tells people what to do, but they're a shepherd in what the individuals feel most proud of.
I mean, can you share any stories of how you help coach, somebody else and like, you help them with their own transformation?
I want to share this one story. In fact, she's now one of the leaders of my team. When I started on this team in particular, all of a sudden, my AVP said, "Hey, we need leadership on this team." So I joined this one team and I noticed that there was one individual highly motivated and executed every task, could carry the world, kind of like Atlas, right? Like could carry the whole entire world. And everybody went to her. And so when we started having our one-on-ones, I started asking, are you happy? And one of the things that she said is like, yeah, I love this. I love doing this. I was like, what do you want to do beyond this role? And it took her 3 weeks to reply to me. I said, take your time, figure out, what do you want to do beyond this? Because right now you're in this role. And if you continue to work at this, you will burn out and you will find yourself, unhappy. And so 3 weeks later, we began to unravel why she was doing this. We started aligning her personality. We started aligning her tendencies under pressure. And we started figuring out, okay, well, she wants to become leadership. So I was like, all right, first things first, let's sign up for a leadership course, right? I was like, I don't care what it costs. Sign up for a leadership course. Start action now, right? And then, I found that all of a sudden she started doing that. And then we started navigating the experience of like, what is leadership? Well, leadership isn't delegation. It's really just leading, right? So we had this balance of how do you stop triaging everything every day and, working in the day-to-day and start to find time for you to work on yourself. And then also empower the other individuals to do the same. And so that is, so over the last year and a half of working with her, we have gone from, let's say 100% of our service desk tickets were triaged by her to now 10%. In fact, she's more like, tier 2, right? Like tier 1 is that immediate triage. She has now trained 4 people to do that and has freed herself up to think, innovate, and lead, and have one-on-ones with her fellow coworkers, not to tell them what to do, but to learn what motivates them, so that when a project comes in, she then can groom a story or work with an individual to figure out what is that thing that, like, what is that genius that they have, and pair it with the project itself. And that team went from the application that they manage, it would fail every day. It would crash every day. And this is an internal application that is critical. It's cash register to the company to iterate over and over and over again. We are now, it's 99.8% uptime, and we now are API first. We were just talking about Kafka, like all these great, amazing projects, because now we can iterate, because she's built this system, not just for herself, but for the rest of the team. And I don't have to attend any meeting. I could go away for 3 months, and I guarantee you that they would do everything that they said they wanted to do, what they were asked to do, and be proud. And it's been probably one of the most rewarding experiences of mentoring an individual to become who they want to be.
So like you mentioned on your website that like you're on a mission to impact 9.5 million people. Where did you get that number? It's like, that's, like a little atypical number to throw out there.
It is absolutely bonkers. Well, it's pure math. So I started this path of bad day excellence almost a year ago. I posted up a video on Instagram, introducing myself. And what I realized is that if I can help 2 people in the first year, and they go on to help 2 people, and I have dedicated myself to at least 15 years to this personal development. It's not, I don't think I will ever be done. But what I realized is that if I build out a system where I help 2 people, they help 2 people, then they help 2 people. If I can build out this system of this ripple effect, that compound growth over 15 years will equate to over 9.5 million people. And I am working with someone now that I think it's going to happen a lot sooner. And this individual, his name is John, and he has this project called the Engaged Father Project. And he reached out to me because of my content, and he's added me to his pilot coaching program to help fathers, just be better versions of themselves. And I've learned so much, and I've only been on his program for 2 weeks, and it's an 8-week program every week for 8 weeks. And it's been amazing, but I've also given him that feedback. And now I know that, like, okay, well, if I can help John build a better version of his product, or even a better version of like his delivery, or just like champion his brand and help him, progress, that he's going to be an amplifier. He's a multiplier of my goal, because all of a sudden we've got 6 people, 6 fathers who are looking to get better. If I can contribute there, all right, that's 6 people. That's way more than 2. And I'm not even a year in. And so I think, the idea of compound growth is wonderful. And it also, because I set my goal out way far, 15 years, right? Way far. It's totally doable, right? If you look at the math, it's totally doable. And I'm already, like, my book was just so that I could do it. I proved to myself that I could do it. But the magic is, through some of my content, I now have 20 sales of my book. And I'm like, that's amazing. That means 20, well, although I will admit, probably 5 or 6 of them are my grandmom, but that's okay. But, it's okay. Like, if I help one person, it's great. And if I help another one, that's great. That's why like my slogan is just one more, because I'm not focused on the 9.5. I know the math will compound and it will work because math is math, right? Regardless of whether it's, the new system or old system, math is math. I know if I focus on just one more person, just one more post, just one more podcast, just one more conversation, that it will compound and build out to what I believe will be over 9.5 million people.
That's amazing. How you came up with that number? And it goes to show like how much impact just one person can have in the world, I mean, I've met people who says like, a whole life to make any change, or a whole life for anybody who listen to me, or I'm not good enough. And every excuse in the book why they can't do things. But one person can have a tremendous impact in the world.
Yeah. I mean, even yourself, I watched some of your content and I loved it. And some of the messages that, we talked about, you've met and interviewed a lot of amazing people. You are a amplifier to what they want to do. And you're an amplifier for me. Like one individual, even yourself, can help so many people. And I think that's what's really important, is that you never know who that individual is. You never know what interaction is going to be the spark or the turning point. So that's why I tell a lot of people, I have this acronym. I love acronyms, by the way. This acronym, TRY, take random yanks. It's important because you never know what will work. You never know what will push you into excellence. And so that's why I preach tiny experiments, approach life, approach work, approach any risk, anything in a tiny bite-sized manner, and just take a random yank and see what happens, because you never know. It may pull you forward to something that is just amazing that you couldn't even fathom.
So Brian, if I'm listening to our conversation today, what is at least one thing you like them to take away from our conversation today?
I think the biggest thing that I would love for people to take away from this conversation is that action creates motivation. That's the most important thing. If you walk the what if, you will find yourself that much smarter, because we learn more from failure than we do success. So if you walk into those areas that you're most uncomfortable with, even if it's a small, tiny step, you will explore something that you would never dream of. And you'll unlock some amazing potential that, some of us only hope we could.
So Brian, if somebody is interested in working with you, or they have a question about a conversation today, what are the best ways they can reach out to you?
Yeah. So I have a website, baddayexcellence.com. You can email me, brian@baddayexcellence.com. And I have several social channels, Instagram, Walsh, me grow. So my last name, Walsh, me grow, as well as there are Bad Day Excellence on Instagram. And then I'm also on TikTok, as well as YouTube for Bad Day Excellence. So you can reach out to me anywhere, and I look forward to it, because I just love talking with people and finding out what makes their heart sing.
Oh, Brian, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's definitely your enthusiasm and excitement about the topic really shows, and and it's wonderful. I wish you had more people like you that are just so enthusiastic about helping people and really want to make a positive difference in lives. And I worked in a lot of companies myself, but I didn't have just nice leaders like you that you probably, I wish they would have listened to this conversation, you definitely have a good understanding of what I think a good leader should be. That's just my own opinion. Being a good listener is very important, and empowering the people you work with is also extremely important. I wish more leaders would be like that. So thank you so much for sharing your message on our podcast. I'm sure a lot of people in the audience will be getting a lot out of it.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for those kind words, Daniel. It was great talking to you.